Welcome back to the Winter Feeding Series. Today's topic is building cattle rations. So we'll talk about maybe some commodities that you would use to build a ration, and then we will also be talking about using uh, Excel-based program to be able to make your own little recipe list to make your own rations. So I'm just going to jump right into it this week, and we're going to talk about custom mixing versus pre-mixed rations. And this might not be necessarily I guess, the best terminology, but this is Terrell terminology, and this is what I come up with in my head. So by a custom mix, I just simply mean you buy your commodities and you custom mix your commodity or your ration yourself, versus a pre-mixed ration, something that you would buy, from a feed dealer, whether that be they come and put it in a feed bin, or maybe you're just buying the big bags and bringing them to the farm. But anyway, it's a pre-mixed ration, and so you may have to do a couple of different rations throughout the year, what have you, to get you through the season. So, as we talk about these, custom mixes do allow for producers to feed multiple groups of animals. Great way to separate your animals out into maybe gestation, lactation, stalker calves, or growing replacement heifers to have the bulls in their own field, because everyone has a different requirement. And we've talked about that definitely before. So you can buy these one set of ingredients and be able to feed everybody off of those same ingredients with just a different mix. Some may need some, more protein than others. Some need more energy than others. So that allows us to do whatever we need it to be. Buying commodities typically is cheaper than something that's already mixed. And again, if it's mixed, you're going to have to feed it out till you're done with it. Whereas with commodities, as things change, you can change your ration. Or if you see that the ration that you're feeding is not doing its thing, then you can go back to the drawing plate and come up with a new recipe. But they are typically cheaper. The con of doing your own mixing is that it does require more labor and probably equipment. You can make it with very little equipment. If you've got a bucket on your tractor and a shovel, you can make it. But it is going to be very hard, and it's going to be a lot of labor throughout the wintertime. You're probably wanting to save time when you feed cattle. So if you're mixing it yourself, you're going to have to put some more time into it than what you have been doing. So that's something to consider. Sources and prices of commodities do fluctuate. Different times of the season, different amounts of availability. So there may be some things that you're holding out for it to go a little bit cheaper, closer to feeding time. But so is probably a lot of other people, and the availability may be pretty low, and you really don't want to miss out on the chance to get something. So sometimes we have to feed or sorry, sometimes we have to buy a little earlier than we wanted for a little more than we wanted to pay, just to ensure that we've got that commodity on hand and on our farm. It's a lot better to be on the farm than waiting it out to be cheaper and somebody else has already got it. Mixing your own feed might not be as consistent as a pre-mix, and that's definitely something we want to talk about. When we talk about the calculator in a little bit, it's not an exact science. It's very much a guesstimate or a rough estimate. And you're probably not going to have the equipment to measure out precise measurements, whereas the plant where you get your pre-mixed ration from probably does. And they've probably got this formula and mix tons and tons and tons of it every week. And so they've kind of got it down to a science where you're really learning. And sometimes our learning comes with mistakes, and our mistakes cost us money. Some things that we want to avoid. First of all, I'll just say this: I'm not a nutritionist. Dr. Shane Gadberry is our nutritionist. And I encourage you, if you have any questions above what you seem to know is my ability, get a hold of Dr. Gadberry, and he would be happy to work with you. I'll try the best that I can and give you all that I've got. And I can also work with Dr. Gadberry to come up with something. Many times your feed dealers do an excellent job of coming up with a ration. And if you're getting commodities from them, they're probably going to work with you on that. So anyway, just some things to think about. Things to avoid in a ration. One is too many high fats in the ingredients in the ration. That really changes the texture of the feed. And when you change the texture of the feed, that's probably going to change the palatability. You're going to have a lot of it probably, stick to the sides of the mixture that you're using or whatever. And that's just not a good thing. There are times and there are animals that need more fat, but we really have to worry about putting too many fatty ingredients into our food. The ruminant system is not going to like that either. You're just not going to get the gain that you really wanted with a lot of fat into their diet. On the same token, worry about excess protein. Two reasons. One, it's like an Atkins diet. When you eat only protein, you lose weight. And so, if you've got excess protein in their diet, you could hinder the amount of weight that they actually gain because you're burning off fat with all that excess protein. The other part of that is obviously protein is always our most expensive ingredient that we're going to buy for. So you're really wasting a lot of money. That's some very expensive manure because they're going to use what they're going to use and then they're going to poop out the rest. So really be concerned about how much protein that you put in their diet and don't go through an excess. Also, too much starch is not good for the ruminant system, and we really have to watch the amount of starch that we would put into a ration. All of the information that you see today, or most of the information, is from fact sheet FSA 3047. Okay, and I've got that here over by me. I'll have to get the directions right. Go to UAEX .edu and you can put in FSA 3047 and it will bring up that fact sheet for you to be able to print, or you can come by your extension office and they can print it, or they may have it in stock from the print shop. We're just going to talk about some of the main ingredients that we would use, get you some numbers down so that you can refer back to those again. This is just exactly what you need for your farm. This may not be something that you want to do. You may want to just go to a mix. I think knowing what the commodities are will help you to decide which mix that you might want. You may want to talk to a different couple of dealers. But if you plan on doing your own, you at least have some idea what's going on here if you're kind of new to this. So here are high crude protein sources. Soybean meal at 54%, cottonseed meal at 46%, distiller grains at 30%, and then corn gluten feed at 24%. Have an image of each of those so that you kind of understand what you're looking for when you go. You see that those are all different textures. It may not be exactly what your dealer has, but they are different textures. For example, you see here on the corn gluten that it's a little more powdery. So that's not quite the texture that our animals are going to want to eat. So if that's something that we go with is a more powdery type substance, then we're probably going to have to add in some roughage because that ruminant system requires that there is some roughage in there. They're used to hay and grass, and that really works well with animals. The best way that you can decide on what your animals need, honestly, is by looking at cow piles. And there's a great video done by another ag agent out there that I can refer you to that talks about cowpieopoly. But you can kind of see whether there's too much fiber in there or there's not enough fiber and it's too loose. So as you go through, you'll notice that and something that you may want to pay attention to. Our low energy TDN type products, rice meal feed, cottonseed hulls, and gin trash. I want to make a little warning here now as we talk about this, especially with gin trash, is that a lot of times with cotton products, so cottonseed hulls, whole cottonseed, or gin trash, that there are products that are used in those crops that do have a withdrawal period, especially for feeding those to animals. So it may be something that you want to talk to your dealer and ask, when was the last time it was defoliated or whatever the chemical might have been, just to make sure that you've got that withdrawal period in there before you start to feed. Okay. High energy TDN type products. So these are things that are going to give us a lot of energy. For example, a starker calf may need a little more of that energy. A cow in gestation, not quite as much. Lactation, she's going to need some more energy. So we have in here, these are pictures are in order of as they're listed. So soybeans, whole soybeans, cottonseed. Again, that's whole cottonseed, distiller grains, corn grain, which is probably not whole corn, but has been either chopped or something like that. Hominy, sorghum grain, and corn gluten feed. Do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer on one of these, and that is whole cotton seeds. As you probably are aware, whole cotton seed is not to be fed to reproductive male animals. There is a problem with glossopol there, and there is a buildup that can happen and make those animals infertile. So if you're feeding everybody at the same plate, be very, very careful of giving them whole cotton seed. Okay, cottonseed hulls is different. Gin trash is different. But if you're feeding whole cottonseed, be very wary of that. And I would not let any replacement bull calves that you might be raising or your bulls eat whole cottonseed. And that also goes for other species with lambs and hogs and anything. Really, you don't want to give them whole cottonseed if they're a reproductive male. High fats. So again, we want to avoid a lot of high fatty ingredients. And so you probably noticed that we've already talked about some of these being a good energy source, but they can also be high in fats. Whole soybeans, whole cottonseed, rice bran, distiller grain, and hominy. These 5 are very high in fats. So let's just kind of worry about that. Also, with hominy, we have to worry about too much starch. So this really doesn't need to be the main part of the diet. There were other things in crude proteins and in a lower energy source that we could use, but we really don't need to make these a big part of the ration. We need to kind of watch these a little bit. Again, there are some times when we have to add roughage. If you're feeding free choice hay, it's probably not something that you're going to have to worry about. If you're using a mixer and you're mixing in hay plus these ingredients, it's probably not something you're really going to have to worry about. Again, look at the cow pies that are in that lot and see what's coming out of them. If they're standing straight up, really nice cakes, then you probably have a lot of fiber. You want a little bit of soup there, but not too soupy. It's not a dairy farm, right? So just kind of look at that back end. It'll tell you whether you need to add roughage or if you've got too much roughage. But both of these are excellent choices for roughage. Then we have this moderate protein to energy ration. These provide really good balance between those wheat middlings and soybean hulls, which are different than what we've talked about thus far. Okay. I wanted to just briefly talk about using broiler litter as feed because it is a very popular option around here. We have plenty of broiler litter to go around. I really wish that we could get it to row crop land, but that's a whole nother topic. So a lot of people use broiler litter as a feed for their cattle in the winter. It's pretty palatable. I don't understand why, but it is. I will say before I talk about anything that, again, if you go to uaex.edu, you can go and find fact sheet 3016, and that's going to give you all the information that I'm going to talk about and probably some that I've missed. But this is just kind of the highlights of things that you probably need to know if you plan on using broiler litter as feed. One of those is that it needs to be stacked about 6 feet to 8 feet tall. And you need that proper height to get heating. Okay. Our goal is that within 5 days, we're going to be at 130 degrees. Research has shown that at 140 degrees, salmonella can be killed within an hour. And that is what we're really wanting to kill, is the salmonella. If you do not get this deep stack, if you do not get this heat, you will have problems feeding chicken litter. Okay. There's no bones about it. You're going to have some issues. How bad those issues are, only time will tell. So I highly encourage you to stack this and let it go through this heat. Our fact sheet talks about that you want to leave it there for 3 weeks. Again, it's very important that you just get the heat established up to like the 130, 140 degree range, but leave it there for a while. You may want to turn this a couple of times with a front end loader just to make sure that everything on the outside has killed the salmonella also. Uh, but keep it there for a little while and let it go through this heat before you start to feed it. Okay. Our recommendation is about 50 pounds of lime, a bag of ag lime, for every ton of litter that you have. And it's kind of hard to maybe stack and turn more than a ton. So I would put a ton in a pile and mix that lime in. It's very hard, I guess you could say, to get a consistent mix on it. But the more times that you do mix it, the more consistent you're going to be. The reason for this is that you have to have a calcium to phosphorus ratio that is correct. And many times that is out of whack with chicken litter. A possibility that you could do before you added the lime is to send this off for a sample. You can send litter off either as a fertilizer sample or as a feed sample. So if you're going to feed it, make sure that you give your agent a heads up that you don't want this tested for fertilizer. You want this tested as a feed stuff. Okay. There is a recommendation or a requirement to withdraw chicken litter 2 weeks prior to slaughter. So there is a withdrawal time if you're going to feed out slaughter animals, that you have a withdrawal of 2 weeks. And I'll just say this: check your cattle for weight loss, anything else that might not be looking right. If they don't have a good gait to them or anything looks off, that's the time to kind of reevaluate this. But you really shouldn't have those problems. But you may are feeding this to an animal that it needs a little more uh, protein or something than what you're able to provide with broiler litter. So just take a look at their weight. We're going to talk about body conditioning scores at the end. If you go down a body conditioning score, you really need to reevaluate probably what you're doing. And then the last kind of tip for broiler litter that I want you to think about is that you do need to be aware of hardware disease. There's lots of things from feed pans or just from the catch crew, whatever. There are metal pieces that get into litter. It's not sifted, it's not highly processed. So just be aware of that there may be some metal in this. And if at all possible, kind of look at it as you put it out, look at it as you put it in your bucket or your mixer or whatever, the best that you can, and really try to make sure that you get the metal out. You do not want to grind chicken litter because it'll be too powdery. It'll become a dust and they will not eat it. So don't process it too much. Don't mix it too much, but do know that you need to be looking for metal just kind of as you go along. If you've got the access to a big magnet that you can run over it before you feed it out, awesome. Just something to make sure that you kind of get the metal out. Okay. I just put these two charts in to show you what you're kind of looking at, because we looked at percentage of crude protein on the others or fat or whatever they were for. So I highlighted on the left-hand side the crude protein for chicken litter and the TDN for chicken litter. So the green is TDN. It's about 50% TDN. So you're going to get half the nutrients from this. And crude protein is 23%. So really not a bad feed put out there, that it can do a pretty good job. It's going to be a lot cheaper than most commodities that you're going to get your hands on. Always mix some kind of corn in with chicken litter. And that's what's right above my head here is the suggested rations for your cattle with litter to corn. So you see that we start with, on our number ones, is a dry brood cow. We go all the way to stalkers. So as we go from 1 to 4, we add more protein requirement, and therefore there is less litter and more corn as you go through this ration. Okay. So for brood cows, dry brood cows, an 80-20 mix And then probably most of you are going to be on category 2 of an average milking cow, which would be 70 pounds of litter and 30 pounds of corn, or whatever that measurement you're using is. But it's a 70-30 ratio. Next, I just want to go through the calculator software that you can use. I think it's a really good help. It's what I'm going to use if you call me. And if you just learn to use it yourself, not that I don't want to help you, I absolutely want to help you. And if you have questions, call me and I'll try to help you out the best that I can. There's not a lot of great tutorials for their software. So just wanted to go over some things just so that you kind of are aware of some things. So at the bottom of the page with the beef.okstate.edu, I put the link to where you actually find this. So if you'll go there, it will bring you up to the page that's on the right. And I've highlighted the yellow, which is the OSU Cowculator is what you're looking for, okay? When you get to that, there will be an instructions and a program tab. Push the program and it will download it. And then you'll probably download it on your desktop. And then you'll see a little file on your desktop that says calculator, okay? I'm going to start back on the left-hand side. If you see there, I've circled feed list in red, and that's where I'm going to start with the software, okay? So this is the feed list page. It has a list of dry feedstuffs, with dry matter, protein, energy, fiber content for all of these ingredients. These are all averages. These came out of Oklahoma, and so these are Oklahoma averages, but very little change actually happens with Arkansas averages on these. There are things that are already put in. So for example, there's Bermuda hay in here. But if you have a hay sample and you've sent it off and you know your numbers, you can edit this to do your own customizable feed list. Also, if you say send that chicken litter off and you get a list back, put that in there. This list doesn't have broiler litter anymore, I don't think. So you're going to have to look back at those numbers that I gave you on that fact sheet and plug them into this if you want to use it as a feed stuff. So just notice, we'll go to the top one here. Number is 51, that's corn gluten feed, and then all the numbers are to the right of that. You need to know that number, okay? So if you're we're going to start here and we're going to write down the numbers for all the things that we're going to use. You'll use that later and it'll be a lot easier for you. This is the cattle and management tab. It says cattle at the bottom, and this is where you input your weights. So your starting weights and where you want to finish to, you put in a finishing weight. Development stage, so are these lactating cows, are these gestation, starker calves. You put that development stage in, the number of days you want to feed. So if you're going to feed for 90 days, for 3 months, you put this in. What body conditioning score do you want to stay, or you want to go up one, or is it okay to go down one? And then breed composition is also here. Breed composition may be kind of hard for a lot of us because you probably don't have a purebred operation. So again, it's just a good guesstimate. Breed is not going to change it dramatically, but there are some breeds that are better converters than others, and that is taken into consideration here. Then we go to our balancer page, which is kind of the nuts and bolts of this whole program, okay? So this allows you as the producer to input your commodities that you're going to use and build your ration. So you probably have hay plus broiler litter plus whatever you're going to mix with that. Some type of corn, or maybe you've got some soybean meal plus your hay, plus we're going to add in maybe some type of energy or fat to that, okay? So the goal here is to provide the daily nutrient requirements and to reach adequate on the status column as much as possible. I say as much as possible because you're never going to get all of those to say adequate. Something's going to be off kilter. If you've got a deficiency in a line here that really doesn't matter, or it's not going to cause any major setbacks, then that's okay. in this example that I've gotten right now, crude protein is the deficiency. Well, obviously, that's probably not the one I want to end on. But if I've got a deficiency in cobalt, it's probably okay. Really, those minerals, we're probably not going to have the exacts on minerals. I just say put minerals out, free choice, and let them have at it. And that way you don't really have to worry about that. We're really just looking at crude protein and energy, TDN. Okay. So here's the scenario for the situation that I worked out. We've got 50, 800-pound mature cows. We're just trying to maintain that 100-pound weight throughout the wintertime. We do want to increase from a 5 to a 6 because I've got some calving going on, maybe at the end of this feeding season, and I want her built up a little bit to be able to make it through that early lactation. We're going to feed for 90 days. I've got 100% Angus cattle in this scenario. These are the numbers for my hay. These are numbers for the soybean meal and the distiller's grain. So I go to cattle management and I have filled out all of those things. Okay. Late gestation, dry cows, 90 days, put in their weight, right? Their small frame Angus cows at 800 pounds. And then I want to go up a body score. And so we go on to the next one. And here's where you just start to tinker. There's, again, not a lot of great tutorial videos for this software. So all I can say is you just got to tinker with it. And the more you mess with it, the better you'll get. I'm still not great. I make 3 or 4 rations a year for some guys. I'm good enough to tinker less and kind of know what's going on here, but just mess with it. You're not going to break anything, and you'll kind of get a feel for it after a little while. As an early career ag teacher, I went to my old ag teacher and asked Mr. B what I was supposed to do to be able to learn how to weld good enough to teach other kids how to weld. And this is what he told me: go buy a box of rods and burn them up. And at the end, you'll probably be all right. And that's kind of the same way here. You just got to go through the system and punch in some numbers. Be realistic, of what an animal is going to obviously eat here. So you'll kind of see here that I've got about 18 pounds of feed per animal mixed up, and that's their daily ration. It's not out of the possibility, still may be a little more than most of those cows are going to eat or what have you, but you're looking at 2% of their body weight, something like that. So just make sure that all those types of things look right. Feed intake ratio, you're going to look for 1. There are instructions to this. You'll remember at the very beginning when you went to the website, there are instructions and then there's program. I highly encourage you to print off the instructions, and that's going to help you with a few tips on how to do things. Okay. And lastly, I just want to talk about body conditioning score because I think that's so important. I really want you to know where you're starting from and whether you need to be going up or if it's okay if you go down. If you're entering the winter at a 4, I think you're okay. You're going to want to bump it up a little bit. You really want to birth at about a 6 because you know that the calf's going to pull her down at least 1, and the 5 is about where we want to stay. Early spring, we really want her to maybe bump back up to that 6. If she's gotten into a 4, then we definitely want her in that 5. And so these just gives you some description and an idea of where your cattle are, right? So we're looking at, can we see the ribs, hooks and pins in the back? Obviously, if she's really fat, she's going to have some pones on the back of her. If she's really skinny, like in body conditioning score, the wind blows too hard, she's falling over. So just to understand what your body conditioning score are. If you don't have cattle and you've got something else, there's a body conditioning score for sheep and goats and just about everything there is. So know kind of where your animal is at and where they need to be at the end of this feeding program. And if you see obvious deficiencies there, then we're going to have to scrap it. And I will say this before we finish: you cannot feed the cheapest commodity and get great results. Commodities are pretty well priced according to their value. The more expensive things like soybean meal are expensive because they're good stuff. Things like gin trash are priced really cheap because gin trash is trash. Just know that it's a belly filler. It has some purposes there, but it's not going to do the same that some other options in those categories did. So if you're trying to get out of feeding as cheap as you possibly can, I understand that, but know that you're probably giving up some weight gain also. So you may be better off to at least do middle of the road to get the weight gain, plus not necessarily break the bank on what commodity that you bought. If you have any more questions, feel free to call or email or find me, and I'll be glad to discuss those things with you. Again, I have my limits, but I'll do the best I can, and I may have to return you back to Dr. Gadberry after a little while. I encourage you to follow me on social media with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And we also have two podcasts, Forages on the Go and the Pike County Extension Minute, which is a short one. Forages on the Go is about 20 minutes. So, anyway, I'm glad that you were able to join me today, and I hope that this helped you. And hopefully, you at least got enough information to start making some decisions or know what questions you need to ask. Thanks for joining me.